Awesome. Okay, so staging improvements. Let's go through the auto deployment changes.
Yeah, so I was reading through it and I got some questions. In general, it's mostly clear, but I don't understand is so far we have including staging canary. It is running before staging, and I know we are going to include another environment that is the staging ref. I just want to know why it is preventing us from including it now. Are we waiting on someone or something?
Yeah, so they are kind of a different thread of the staging improvements project. So they haven't necessarily been synced up. We probably expect staging ref to start getting deployments maybe next week. It's quite soon. So that will be it. Yeah, it's not because we've been waiting on anything in particular, just that the staging ref project required kind of other work to get a get environment up and understood and things, versus the staging canary project was pretty trivial to stand up the canary. So that was the only reason they're not synced up. But yes, from about next week, hopefully, staging ref will deploy in parallel with staging canary.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. And then another question that I have is about, there is an issue associated to this epic about changing the order of the deployment. And there is like this picture that basically states, actually number 3 of the option 4 states that production and staging are going to be deployed almost in sync, staging a bit ahead. But my question is, we are going to still use the baking time, right? And baking time is going to be triggered after the deploy to the canary, to production canary.
Yes.
So are we going to deploy staging after the baking time or staging after production canary?
I'm actually not sure. This is probably a bit of an implementation detail. So I suppose the way to think about this one is staging and production need to have the same package in order to maintain mixed deployment, like consistency, should I say. So in order to achieve that, staging and production get the same package deployed to them. But we don't want to be, we want customers to know that we deploy to our staging environment before our production environment. So the only requirement is that staging deploys before production.
Okay.
How long that is, it doesn't really matter. It can be minutes. So I think the bit that we perhaps want to be careful of is if we do like a full deployment to staging, if we didn't put that same package on production, we would need to roll staging back, because otherwise we lose our version consistency. So I think the end iteration, like the ideal perfect state, would be that staging probably starts deploying and maybe like 10 minutes later, production starts, so it's just behind, but whatever the sensible cuts are inside the job. So Graham will probably figure this out. I think he may use baking time as kind of an initial iteration, just because it's a job we have that gives a predictable period of time. But yeah, the main requirement is that we are able to tell customers we deploy staging ahead of production.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because when I read that, I was thinking that staging is going to be deployed after baking time, but then I thought that makes no sense because we don't really need to wait anything for staging.
Exactly.
So yeah, okay, great. And then my final question. So I was seeing the video that is linked actually above the end of this issue. I think you recorded it a couple of weeks ago, in which you had a discussion with Alessio, with Meg, and with Naila. And then, they were saying that executing staging and production roughly at the same time had like the following, the benefits of ensuring the package is always tested against multi-version compatibility, and that staging is going to be kind of a true production environment like, in a way that it is going to have the same features and the same, sort of the same database. So my question here is that the staging that you are referring is not the staging that we have right now, because the staging that we have right now, the database is very different from production, right? So I assume, or I think that the staging that you are referring is the new staging ref, or is the current staging that we have?
No, that's a great question. Yeah, so no, that recording is entirely around staging and staging Canary. So in terms of the database, yes, you're right. In terms of the data will be different for that video, and for anything to do with ordering of deployments. I think we were thinking around it in terms of changes applied, perhaps rather than like config or data. Does that make sense? So like when we say staging Canary and staging are consistent, we're talking about they get the same package in the context of that video. So for the database, what we were talking about is staging and production database being equivalent. We're saying the same migrations have run versus it's exactly the same data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's just that one part of the video, I think it was Seth who mentioned that one of the benefits of having the same package exactly in staging and in production was to use staging as a true production environment. And if we are still using the current database, that is actually not true.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, in that sense, it's not going to be true for, yeah, you're right. It's not going to be true for testing like database changes. It will be true for, I think if I remember, we were probably talking about it in the context of having all of like the services available, the components available. And what that will mean is we can test we don't test like application changes, but yeah, there is still going to be a big gap on the test data.
Yes.
Staging ref will attempt to solve that.
Okay, so I guess I have two more questions based on that. If we are going to continue using staging for this reorder, do we plan to update the database of staging anytime soon?
Maybe.
Is it included in the Epic?
I think it could be a different project, but we may do.
Okay.
The reason I'm not saying we definitely should. Okay. Is because just because all of these changes are focusing very much around mixed version deployments. So I think the data on staging is a problem, but it's a sort of a slightly different problem in that we don't have a realistic way of testing migrations. It's non-trivial to change the data on staging. And what I think will be the difficult part about it is the fact that we haven't been refreshing it for
5 or 6
long.
years. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. That people expect it to be stable, which means a lot of test data is very likely to have been added in and relied on. So we would need some way of finding that. And people switching to like either having test data in production that we would then keep pulling into staging, or, you know, I think if we were just to refresh it today, I think a lot of tests will fail because the data they're expecting won't exist.
Okay.
So it's non-trivial, but I think it's something which once we've done the so I think there's probably this kind of that ties in. There are 2 more phases. Let me see. I think so. I think there are 2 more phases of staging improvements that we already know about that will come after staging ref and after the staging Canary project. So the next one is most likely going to be like generate staging traffic.
Yes.
On staging, and that will mean that we can actually then start relying on alerts and actually finding a lot of stuff. So that's going to most likely be the piece we're coming next, and then it will be consider refreshing staging data. That one I think is a little question mark, because I think what we haven't fully, what we don't know yet is how likely it is that staging ref does replace the staging environment. From a test environment point of view, staging ref is a better environment. People have admin access. It is something that can be spun up and torn down as needed, which means we can have multiple ones. You know, there's lots of benefits to staging ref. The downside of staging ref is it is built off the reference architecture. And on our current kind of pipeline of infrastructure changes, we go to the pre-environment, the staging environment, production. And at that point, it goes into the reference architecture, which means from the infrastructure point of view, staging ref is lagging production, whereas staging is not. So from a testing of infrastructure changes, that we will need something like staging available to us.
Okay, got it.
There's kind of different staging test requirements almost. So we haven't kind of we haven't finalized that conversation, but depending on how that concludes, then yeah, we may or may not want to refresh staging data.
Okay, got it. So it is a different project, a different sort of problem. And on this pipeline, we are going to assume that staging is the current staging.
Yes.
So perhaps it is a little early to answer this, but how is the new staging ref is going to be included in the coordinated pipeline?
That is a great question. We don't know. Pierre's going to have to figure that out, because what he has, so the only decision we've made right now is that it will deploy alongside staging Canary from a time point of view. So it'll be the package we want to put on staging Canary will be the package that we also want to put on staging ref. That's the only decision we've made so far.
Okay.
Now, there are some problems with doing that. One, of course, is that if the tests fail on staging Canary, for us, it's a canary, right? So canaries, we just drain. We don't have to do anything. Staging ref is an environment. So for now, at least, that doesn't matter too much, but I don't know how we will recover staging ref if we put a bad package on it. It'll have to just wait for the next deployment, if that makes sense. So imagine like so I think what we're trying to decide is staging ref equivalent to a staging, or is it equivalent to a staging canary? It's the kind of the thing we need to like at some point figure out. It doesn't matter too much at this stage, but in the future. So staging canary is a canary environment. We deploy a package. That's the earliest point we deploy a package. If it fails or there's anything wrong with it, it's a canary environment. We can drain the traffic out of that, no problem. But if we put a package on staging and it doesn't work, we can't drain a staging. We would roll it back to get it consistent. So what we need to, in the future, I think, figure out for staging ref is, I guess it could be drained in that we could dump the environment and respin it up, right? It's a get environment. But what we don't know is when we put a bad package on staging ref, we have no way of rolling it back. We have no way of draining it. So does it just stay broken until the next deployment? I don't know. We have no recovery for that. We haven't figured that out yet.
Why we cannot roll back staging ref?
We haven't got any tools.
Okay.
Like, this is what I mean. We haven't, at this stage, we haven't got any. So the kind of, I guess, the timeline of, not timeline, the broad pieces of the staging ref project. So let me step back a little bit. So context for this project for staging improvements is MEC is the kind of overall leader. So quality are kind of the majority stake in this project. Development are involved to provide development help. Infra are involved to provide like infra help. And then there are two threads to this project. One is staging ref. Two is staging canary. So now at this stage of the project, staging Canary is fully within the delivery team's ownership. We're the only ones working on this, defining it, using it. So we're kind of the complete decision makers around this project at the moment, collaborating with quality, but in terms of who's deciding what order of task and how to go about that, that's fully our project. Staging Ref is a quality project, so it's a little bit different. And in terms of the infrastructure side of things, I'm the DRI, but Pierre and Cindy are the ones doing the actual work. It's not a delivery project. And that's because we are mostly providing infra support to enable quality rather than it being our environment. Like, I don't think we will, as delivery, I don't think we'll be using Staging Ref anytime soon. It's quality are going to use it to build out a new test suite. So what that means in terms of broad pieces of work for Staging Ref is the environment has been created. Next step is to connect it to some deployment so that it receives new packages. Then there's kind of some work to give it some monitoring and alerting, so we actually have some health visibility for this environment. Then once we've got sort of some of those pieces in place, we can actually start deciding, is this an environment that tells us more about our package or not? When it does, we make it a blocking environment. So Staging Ref becomes a blocker for deployment. So we reach a point, maybe in 3-4 weeks, where a package must be deployed to Staging Ref plus to Staging Canary. It must pass all of the tests that quality choose to put it through on those two environments. There'll be different test suites. It must pass both of those before we decide that this thing is suitable to deploy to production Canary. So these two, they co-parallel and then they come back together. So we haven't got that yet. We haven't got the tests in place. What we don't know is how long a Staging Ref deployment takes. We don't know anything about deploying to the Get environment yet. So that's also a thing. We don't quite know where to put it in the pipeline, because it could be it's a 2-minute deployment, or it could be it's 2 hours. Like, we've literally no idea. So we'll see that stuff as we go along.
Sounds like a very complete and thorough deployment, having all these staging.
Yeah, exactly.
Then,
we're going to have to
great.
See how it goes. I mean, it gives us a lot more. It gives us a much more thorough test, which is good.
Yeah.
Like, we will see a lot more failures around the staging stage of the deployment. But what that should mean is fewer incidents. That's the goal, is that we have way fewer incidents, we pull things back. But we are going to have to review how the release manager experience is, because it will be a little bit more complicated, because a package will kick off and it will sort of hit 3 staging environments, and failures on any of those 3 have a different response. So
it is going to be interesting
stuff for us. Yeah,
I guess the coordinated pipeline is going to need a lot of hand holding, like for you to stay on top of the pipeline and to see where it fails and to see how to do the resolution. So interesting. Well,
yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And that's kind of what that was what I sort of, a lot of this involved stuff in terms of like what's happening and how we're going to do the changes. For some people in the team, they don't need to know the ins and outs, but once we have it in place, it affects all of us from release management. So, it's kind of a big change for us.
Okay, perfect. So those are all my questions.
Great. Okay, good stuff. And so if you think of others, like, keep asking. If I'm not around, Alessio has been pretty deep in this project as well. So he'll also be able to, in fact, just use G delivery, because this stuff affects everybody. So hopefully people see these questions as well. Okay, awesome. Cool. So on the next point, I actually tried to, I was reading through it and I tried to build something to represent my thoughts, because then, this is very difficult. So I'm just gonna share my screen. If of course my keyboard is starting to, okay, my keyboard is not reacting, yay.
Or perhaps I can do it with my mouse. Just 1 second, I'm gonna to connect my keyboard.
Yeah, no problem. I just replied to Skubek.
Okay. Oh, it is working now. So I'm gonna share my screen to try to explain this. So this is the same slide that you had in your presentation, exactly the same, right? And I think at the very same level of this epic of reordering the auto-deploy jobs, we also have two other epics kind of in parallel. We have the decide the future of the post-deployment migrations, and we also have the single pipeline phase 2, right? And the purpose of this presentation is to try to explain how these two can fit, or how can we mix these two into also this epic, how this can work together, right? So the first one, and of course my mouse is now not working, yay. Okay, perfect. So future of post-deployment migrations. So what I understand so far is that first, we are going to deploy to Canary staging, then Canary production, and then we are going to deploy to staging automatically after Canary production, and then we are going to deploy manually. Well, after Canary production, we are going to execute baking time of wherever time is going to be, and then the manual execution of deployment to production.
Might be a little different. These are probably implementation details. The order is right. It may be that the staging deployment is linked to the manual promotion, just because we only want to put a package onto staging if we also want to put it on production. So I'm not sure quite how we'll implement that, but it may be that it's the manual trigger to production includes the staging deploy.
Yeah, probably an implementation detail, but then that will imply that the staging will be executed after baking time too.
It may be.
Okay. Okay.
Because baking time will be the thing that gives us the confidence for production. So putting production canary in production. So only requirement is that staging is leading on production. Now, it could be leading by 5 minutes. It could be literally that once we finish like the staging prepare job, we trigger the production deployment. Like they could be linked in some way that's not like an hour. So I say these are going to be implementation details. Think of staging as once we've made the decision that this package is going to production, we add it onto staging. Yeah, I mean, they have to go like together or not at all. I understand that part. Yeah, okay. Well, let's say that the automatic deployment for staging and the manual deployment for production, they are kind of triggered at the same time, so we can work through this assumption. So this one on the left is the coordinated pipeline. And this one on the right is a different pipeline that I haven't had a name for it. And the pipeline is about deploying the post-deployment migrations on staging and on production. This pipeline on the right, it is going to be manually executed by a release manager, at least on the first iteration. And we are going to aim to execute it at least once a day. It can be more, but at least once a day. Can I just add on to that slide? Can I just drop on staging graph as well?
Yeah. Feel free to do it.
Help for this. So
it took me way too much time to build all these.
Oh my gosh, I know, right? I have said the number of times in my career, I feel like my startup idea for the future, a tool that lets me draw out a deployment pipeline. I spent my entire life trying to draw boxes that show deployment pipelines. And there's nothing trivial. I cannot be the only person that spends hours of my week drawing deployment pipelines.
Yeah, and then it is, I mean, using PowerPoint or whatever this is not very helpful. You have to be very patient. But yeah,
Yes.
I understand.
So this is, I'm going to put this as dashed for now, because for now it's non-blocking.
Okay.
Okay, so that's going to be how we will be. And I think at the point where we have the jobs as different pipelines, this probably will be blocking, but yeah, just so we kind of have it official. So they'll be running in parallel. The decision from both of these environments will need to be taken into account before we do a deploy to gprod Canary.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so this is like the broad look of the coordinated pipeline and the post-deployment pipeline. And then the following slides are how are they going to look like the deployer pipeline for each environment. For example, this is for GSTG Canary. And currently, well, we have regular migrations, then the fleet, then the track, then QA, and then it finishes. This is like a very simplified stages. I didn't put all of them because it is larger, but this represents kind of the current status.
I did think when I saw it, I thought, oh, that's awesome. I thought it was more complicated. That's so nice and simple. Okay.
Yeah, no. And then for the new, this is my understanding, that is going to be, okay, regular migrations, then
I'm going to just
Italy.
tick this box, but let me just mention that. So I added some extra steps here based on the work Graham's doing at the moment. So I'll just tick that to the formatting. Fix
okay. So
and I think we haven't got it at the moment, but okay. So it'll quite soon, next week, it will look like this.
Awesome. Okay, perfect, Prof. We're going to have Italian prefect. Okay.
Yeah.
So
the reason for that is this is kind of important. So this is because Staging Canary is going to be the environment that we deploy to, right? So this is the one where we want to, before we go to production, this is going to be the essential place for testing. So this will end up being our most capable environment. So even if production Canary doesn't have the step, like it doesn't have a prefect step, on production Canary, we probably will put one on Staging Canary so that we get like the best version of testing.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
And maybe some problems with that because we don't have it on production Canary for a reason, but certainly that the intention is to make Staging Canary our like most fully fledged capable environment.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, the only difference between these two is that Q&A on the new one, we are going to have like the full Q&A and then the mixed deployment Q&A. This is what I understand, right?
That's it.
And then if both of these are green, we are going to finish, and that's it.
That's it.
And then it is sort of the similar for production Canary, in which right now we have migrations, Italy, fleet, track, Q&A, and finish. And then on the new version, we're going to have the same one, right? Q&A are going to be 2 jobs, which is going to be the full Q&A and then the mixed deployment Q&A.
Yeah.
Okay. And the staging deployer pipeline, this one is modified a bit further. Currently, we have the migrations, the Italy, prefect, fleet. Then we execute the post-deployment migrations, then the tracking, Q&A, and finish. And on this new version, the post-deployment migrations are going to be removed because they are going to be executed in the new pipeline. And Q&A is still the same. Q&A is going to execute, I think, the full pipeline.
It might. I think it's a question mark. It may or may not. Like I think it's up to quality. Like it may not add much value, but yeah, for now, leave it in. It certainly might be there.
Okay, cool. And then for production, it is sort of the same modifications. We don't run Q&A on production, but the only modification is that the post-deployment migration pipeline job is going to disappear. And in the new version, it is going to be associated with this new pipeline that we were talking about. Okay. So these are the changes that are going to be kind of included or that are the way they are going to look with the new future of the post-deployment migration epic.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, for the single pipeline, the purpose of the single pipeline is to remove the complexity from the deployer pipeline and actually move it to the release tools to actually be like the coordinator of everything. And how is it going to look in this very broad sense? There are I think we have 2 or 3 more pending issues of the single pipeline, at least on the phase 2. One is to move the Q&A, and another one is to move the tracking. And we have another one about making Q&A and making time execute at the same time. But for this purpose, I think we're mostly interested about the Q&A. So with the coordinated pipeline, this is the very broad presentation. We are going to execute staging canary, and down here, we are going to have staging ref. We are going to execute Q&A, the long Q&A and the mixed deployment Q&A, then the Slack notification, and then we are going to move to production canary, Q&A for both of them.
A little different. Let me just add on here, because I think this is where we start to see the complexity. So we're going to deploy to that. So what we're going to find is I'm not actually sure if this is the correct place to put this into, but I think it is. We're actually going to end up with this. So we'll have these 2 staging environments, and they are going to each deploy and run tests. And the outcome of all of these 3 will be the decision on whether this is working or not.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm not actually sure on the Slack notification. Is that accurate? That
probably
what is
going
the Slack
to be
notification? Is that like staging? Is that staging canary has finished? Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, has finished or failed or succeeded.
So
probably there's going to be a different Slack notification.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was just like, yeah, you're right. So that's actually going to go there. And then there's a kind of, there has to be like a decision at this point. I suppose the coordinate pipeline makes that decision, right?
Yep. Yeah, I guess this deploy to production canary is only going to be executed if all of these, all these jobs have been successfully executed too.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Like the end goal, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so after all these stagings have been executed, well, not all the staging, canary staging and staging ref have been executed, we are going to execute production canary, which is also going to execute the full Q&A and the mixed deployment Q&A, and is going to send a Slack notification. And then here comes the part about deploying to staging and to production. For production, we are going to use baking time. It is going to be a manual production as it is so far, and that will be it. For staging canary, we still need to decide if deployment to staging, it is going to be triggered after baking time, or perhaps it is going to have its own baking time, etc. But it should be kind of at the same time of production. And then we are going to execute Q&A on staging, and we are going to send a notification, and that will be it.
Maybe it'd be worth us taking that. Well, no, let's leave it. Yeah. So we may not bother with that QA on staging, but we figure that quality can figure that out. It doesn't add much value, right? Because at that point, the staging deployment is bring staging up to the correct version rather than validate the package.
Yeah, sorry, I am having problems with microphone, and I don't know if you can hear me. It's disconnected.
Yeah. We may not run this QA job because of the staging deployment is make staging the correct version, give staging.
No, I'm going to.
Hey, you're breaking up. Is this your internet? Yes.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's all right. Awesome. So, yeah, I was just saying, so I don't know what makes it cleaner on the diagram to show QA or not. We may or may not run it after the staging because the goal of deploying to staging is simply to put staging on the same version that we will be running in production. So we're not really expecting those tests to ever fail. So we can see on timing, but it's up to you. What do you think is the most, the cleanest representation for this diagram?
Okay, yeah, it can be like we have like an interrogation symbol right here to see if perhaps this one is not going to be executed.
Yeah, cool.
But yeah,
cool.
Okay, yeah, that can be an implementation detail. Yeah, and for the deployer pipeline, well, it is going to be simplified actually. Q&A is going to be removed from staging canary, like on the new implementation. And my Zoom is failing again, right? Let me know if you cannot hear me, please.
Yeah, you're right at the moment. Keep going.
Okay, product canary is not going to be X. And then same thing, it is going to be for stage. Be removed. And the plus deployment migration.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Perfect. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Cool. Yeah, see how it goes.
For us, what are going to be the
you're still dropping in and out. So let's see how we go. We can hopefully rely on the agenda of it. So can I skip a section into move on to is I guess I just want to make sure we go through before we are out of time for the I think your slides have got all the stuff. So we've got the rough order of work is auto deploy reorder. Okay, so those are kind of the two big projects we have: is reorder, is auto deploy, reorder, and the future of post deployment migrations. So what's our next task for this? So what's the next other pieces of the single pipeline? So I'm going to just jump to here. Like what if anything do we need to complete from single pipeline to help with particularly with A?
Yeah, sorry, I had to use actually Mac because I don't know what's going on.
Okay, did you catch that? So we've got the kind of rough order of work is we've got the auto deploy reorder tasks that Graham's just started on. Then following that, we can do the future of post deployment migrations tasks that you've already created. So what are the, I'm going to move this one further down. But like what do we need to complete from the single pipeline phase 2, or particularly like what's the order of things we need to complete to support the auto deploy, I suppose the auto deploy reorder plus staging?
Yeah, so I have been thinking about that, and honestly, I don't know if we technically, strictly talking, we need an item. We can move on without a single pipeline phase 2. The thing about the single pipeline phase 2 is that it's going to help us reduce the technical debt we have right now, because modifying the deployer pipeline is quite painful. It is very difficult to test. There is a lot of involved when we kind of want to modify the deployer pipeline versus modifying the release tools. So ideally, it will be nice to move Q&A out of the deployer pipeline into the release tools so we can do this reorder, but this is not strictly necessary.
Okay. So on slide 9, where we have the kind of complicated deployment that brings in staging ref, are there any single pipeline changes that we're going to need to have already done to support that?
So to support this, we do need to move the Q&A from the deployer pipeline to the coordinated pipeline. That will be required.
Okay. Okay, great. So we should do that because this is going to be needed in like two or 3 weeks.
Okay.
So let me. Is only the QA triggers? Are we okay with the Slack notification stuff, with the notification the tracking stuff? Sorry.
I think the tracking can be we can leave it on the deployer. I don't think we actually need it. I mean, it would be nice to move it, but for this coordinated pipeline to look like it can be done. Like we can leave it on the deployer pipeline. It is not necessary to move it.
Awesome. Okay, great stuff. And does it are we in a position where we can move the QA triggers as the next piece and then do the tracking afterwards? Because I think we've got them listed in the other order at the moment.
Exactly, because we were working from the outside to the inside, and I think the tracking was first. I don't remember, but I remember that moving them that way is going to be easier for us. But I guess we can also start with Q&A. Actually, Q&A is the more complicated one.
Okay. Would you mind reviewing like just what the impact will be? Because I recall us talking about this. We don't. So let's see. We don't need tracking for this, but it might be. Okay, so review if it is. Okay, and then cool. Okay, great. Awesome. And then the rest of it, it's the rest of it is just, as you say here, it's a good thing to do to simplify the pipeline. So cool. Okay, great stuff. And then I'm just scanning through 5 and 6. It sounds like there were no immediate tasks needed. Is that correct? So like steps 1 to 3 on removing the blocking nature of post-deployment migrations, we don't need that immediately. Is that correct? Or we do need that?
I do think we need that. I do think we need that for the reorder of the post-deployment migrations, because if we leave the post-deployment migration on staging and on production, we need to make sure that when the production deployment is triggered, the post-deployment migration have been executed on staging, because they are going to be on the same pipeline. Otherwise, there's a chance of us executing the post-deployment migration on production first, then on the staging.
Just say that again for me.
Yes, so right now the deployer pipeline on staging has the post-deployment migrations, right? The same production. If we leave those jobs there, when we move the switch to execute the staging and deploy in production roughly at the same time, there is going to be a chance for us to execute the post-deployment migration in production first, than on the staging. So there is going to be this manual check for release managers to check, okay, have the post-deployment migration been executed on the staging? Yes, okay, then I can promote to production.
I see, yeah, okay. So one thing that we should probably make a decision on, and like certainly like we should make it's you and Graham and Alessio, maybe it's task for next week actually to figure out, is whether it is a good idea or a bad idea. So I think we have two there are 2 ways we could make this change, right? So we could I think say move from existing auto deploy pipeline to the planned one. And option 1 is to, I suppose, like, I'm thinking this may not be, I haven't thought this one deeply through, but I'm thinking like we could say move the post-deployment jobs out of existing auto deploy pipeline and like basically trigger later using coordinated pipeline. Like we could just literally pull that job and stick it further in. Or B is to start on steps 1 to 3 of this one, as you say. And what would be good for us to actually think about is which one is the smaller iteration, and because they both kind of they both help us. Neither is like the full solution that we're hoping for. So it's a which is the smaller iteration to get us to
When you say with option one, option A is to move them out of the deployer pipeline and put them in the coordinated pipeline. Is that what you mean?
So they would probably still be a deployer pipeline, but they would be triggered later by the coordinator. So there'd be like a separate pipeline that gets triggered on the auto deploy schedule. So they're kind of, I guess it's closest to what Alessia originally said as like the delayed auto deploy. Try again. The delayed post deployment migration job. The reason I wonder if that might be a smaller iteration is just because that doesn't change anything from a release manager's point of view. A pipeline just runs through with every step. So we may not need to worry about the kind of additional pieces around like monthly releases and making sure we've actually executed them. Now, it may not help us, like it might, like I'd say, I'd have a chat with Graham and Alessia about how we want to bring this in, because actually maybe it is easier to just jump to doing steps 1 to 3 of the because I suppose what concerns me a little bit around the future of the post-deployment migration work is just that we don't want to be in a situation for too long where we haven't got steps 4, 5, probably not the others so much, but definitely 4 and 5, like we end up for a little period of time in a semi-risky place. So wonder if there's depending on how much other work we have to do around the auto deploy reordering, if there's a smaller iteration that gives us what we need on mixed deployments without us needing to kind of do all of this work in parallel. We don't have to decide for now, so I think that's totally fine, but I think it would be a good one for those to be the options. I think I can't think of maybe there's another one, other option. But I think that's a decision we need to kind of make. So I say like decision needed. So in fact, before you go away, so this one would be a great one. Would you mind grabbing Alessio at least, and maybe Graham as well if you can? I mean, you're not going to have a great time with Graham, but at least Alessio, and just figuring out what we want to do for that stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually seeing that epic that Graham is leading. I don't know if you have seen it. He updated it last night, and there is a step number 3 that it says move post-deployment migration from being handled by the deployer to being handled by the release tools. And the objective is the same that we are talking about. He doesn't have implementation details yet, so probably this is the best.
Exactly.
Question, like how do we plan to do this? Either by moving the jobs to the coordinated pipeline, or implementing the future of the post-deployment migration, or doing something else. Yes.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. So yeah, I think it would be ideally it would be you and Graham talking about this, but it would be good to have Alessio's input. So async if you can. Otherwise, see what you can do about syncing with those two. But so please work with Graham and Alessio. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like that's kind of Graham's. I've got so many tabs open. It's a disaster. So yeah, so we can get. And the reason I specifically saying that is I'd love to your kind of you to be able to kind of guide on that stuff before you go away, and then if any implementation stuff happens whilst you're out, at least the decision of how it's going to be done will have been decided.
Yep, makes
awesome.
sense.
Super. Great. Okay. Oh, we've got just 1 minute left. So is there any other stuff you want to discuss? Like, how are you feeling about this overall, like where we're at the moment?
Yeah, no, I like it. I think we discussed it all. Thank you for your time. I think we are both on the same page. What I am going to do is the task that you assigned me about reviewing Q&A can be done before tracking, and to start talking with Alessio and with Graham about how are we going to move the post-deployment migration jobs?
Awesome, that makes sense. And one thing I just want to say in the final second, so when you have decided on either QA triggers or the tracking, would you mind picking that as your next task?
Okay.
Whichever one we make sense to do first, and then if it happens we need to do tracking first. Once you finish that, we'll prioritize in the QA triggers. But if we can just do QA triggers, that would be great. But it sounds like we need to get QA triggers one way or another.
Okay, sure.
Super, amazing. Thanks, Myra. I'll upload this video and share you the link. I'll move this stuff into another agenda as well, so we can tidy that all up.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks very much, Myra. Chat to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.